Lovely. Well, thank you all for coming to the most patronizing of all the sessions at this conference. And it seems particularly crazy to have people like Kirsten sat here who knew what Folio was from the beginning. No, not at all. I'm glad to have you here, and you can verify that I know what Folio is. So what we want to do is give you 3 answers to that question. We know that Folio is an acronym for the future of libraries is open, which is a very utopian promise. We want to look at how the different things that Folio is contribute to making it possible to fulfill that promise. So it's 3 things at least. It's a library management system, it's a community, and it's a platform for developing applications. And I'll very briefly touch on each of those and then hand over to specialists to discuss their areas. This diagram might be familiar to some of you. It's actually only part of a diagram Marshall Breeding made in 2019, showing the progressive consolidation of vendors of library-related software. Now, for some reason, the past is over on the right here, and we move to the left towards the present. But you can see this suffocating trend of a diversity in the marketplace and of lots of different offerings maybe tuned to different libraries' needs, all being compressed down by acquisitions, different products being shut down, until we're left with a much smaller number of options. And so that's why it's very important that we have competition in that marketplace, which Folio provides, hopefully not just as one more option in the marketplace, but as something fundamentally different. One important aspect of that is that because it's open source, because it's owned by the non-profit organization, the Open Library Foundation, it can't be acquired. It's safe from being taken over by Ex Libris or some other of the big players. It's not going to go away. It's not going to be deprecated because the organization that buys it finds it strategically more convenient to prioritize a different product. So it should always be there to present a real alternative. And then the second thing Folio is a community, which is critically important for the way not just the software is developed, but the whole direction of the project is decided. So any interested party can make contributions of many different kinds, including providing code or running services or doing things like internationalization. And I don't want to say too much or I tread on Peter's toes. And the last thing, which we'll come back and I'll talk about a little bit at the end, is how Folio is a platform in which modules run and how important that modular architecture is for providing an ecosystem where you can have a lot of competition between different organizations to provide bits of Folio that run in ways that best suit your libraries. So over to Tara to tell us about the library management system.
Okay, so I'm Tara, and I'm going to tell you about Folio as a library management system. And I'm so sorry for some of you in this room. I feel like this is going to be so insultingly basic, but thank you for bearing with me. So just a quick terminology check. Do we all know what an ILS is? I would think so, but some of you might have said LMS or LSP at some point. I don't know if there's a different word. What is the word for ILS in German? You know? Interesting.
We would like to say, like,
that's cool. So originally I was told that an LSP is like a future ILS and an LMS is another term from more popular here. But whatever it is, it's the system that runs your library. That's all that really matters. And Folio isn't organized like a lot of library systems. So Folio is made of apps, and those apps are organized into different areas. So circulation, for example, is made out of these apps. So you have check-in and check-out and requests and courses. Acquisitions is made out of these apps. Metadata management or cataloging is basically these apps. ERM is pretty much these ones. And then we have some sort of general apps. So we have users for managing our users, settings for controlling the other apps, and LDP for reporting. And then we have more. We have new apps that are being developed as we speak. And then libraries individually sometimes work to add functionality to those apps that is appropriate for their system. So for example, Index Data wrote a little script that helped one of our customers to deal with title level requests before title level request was available. And so from your library's perspective, like the end of the ILS can be a little bit more than what you see in Folio. So we're gonna attempt to do my very favorite demo in Folio Snapshot. So Folio Snapshot is an environment that's online and it's open to everyone. So you can go in and see what Folio looks like right now and change the language to another language or mess up all of the settings that someone very carefully put in before this demo. So we're gonna try and do this. We'll see how it goes. So our goal is going to be to take a book all the way from the idea of ordering it to a patron's hands, right? So when we talk about Folio as an ILS, one thing that can be really confusing for new users is all of the switching around between individual apps. So right now we're on the main page of Folio, and all of these things up here, these are the apps that we use to get our work done, right? And as someone pointed out, we are currently logged in as the user with the most permissions possible. So we are seeing all of the apps. When you log in as an individual user, you're probably going to see some smaller subset of that. And that's happening because of permissions, right? So we've got a couple of important things that we pay attention to every time we log in. One of those is who we're logged in as. Very important if you are working at a service point to not be logged in as your boss. Another thing is our service point. So we were logged in as online, and I happen to know I need to be at Circ Desk 1. So we're standing at a pretend Circ Desk at a library, and we're calling it Circ Desk 1. Very creative, I know. So at our Circ Desk 1, we have a user who's come to the desk, and they're like, I would like to check out the book Bunnicula. Do you have that book? So where are we going to go for that? We're going to go straight into inventory. And here we have some options to search. And this is a very common layout that we see all the time in Folio. We've got the ability to search on the left, and then we've got our search results on the right. So we are going to go ahead and be lazy and search by keyword like all of our users do, even though we give them all these cool facets. There we go. And it turns out our library doesn't have Bunnicula. Shocking, such a good book. So we're going to go ahead and order Bunnicula. And to do that, we're first going to import a record. So we're going to use single record import and import it using the OCLC number, conveniently pulled up here. And apologies in advance, this keyboard is not like my keyboard at home, and so having a little trouble navigating. All right, so we are gonna go to Actions, and we're gonna click on Import. We're gonna paste our number in here, click Import, fingers crossed. There we go. All right, so we brought in our bib record using single record import. Yay. If we had questions about what happened with that import, we could go to the Data Import app. So when I click on the Data Import app here, I can see that I'm in Data Import up in the left-hand corner, right? My single record import is going to be not in that main log, but I can see it right here. This is the import that we just made, right? Okay, so we've got our bib record, and what's the next thing we need to do? We're going to order the book, right? So we're going to go to the Orders app. And here we are going to create a new order. And for anyone who actually does this work, you're going to be mortified because I'm going to skip a million steps that are really important, but I'm just going to do that so that we can get past this screen. All right, so we just created the header of our order, and we used a template to make it really fast. And that can be a huge time-saving thing for you. Nobody's going to point out that what I'm doing makes no sense for a library. The next thing that we need to do is add our purchase order line, right? We need the line that's going to represent the book that we're trying to order. So we're going to click on Title Lookup. And we're going to search again for the book that we just added, the instance that we just added. There it is. And now all of this information is brought into our purchase order line. Awesome. So I'm looking for the very bright red required fields that I'm going to attempt to type on this keyboard and bring in. So I'm saying this book costs $30. We're getting one of them. I need to add a fund distribution. So these funds, they're actually handled in finance, but I can see them here. Sure, that makes sense. So we're gonna go ahead and save and close. Hopefully we didn't miss anything. Awesome, so we created our purchase order line. So back on our purchase order, we're going to open it. Awesome, okay, so now we have an open order for funicular. I'm looking at the order line right now. And if I click on the title, it's gonna take me back to inventory, where now instead of just an instance, we also have holdings and an item. So our item doesn't currently have a barcode and its status is on order because we just ordered it. Okay, so we have an open order, we have our inventory, and because we're ordering this for a patron, maybe we want to make sure that when it gets here, it's going to actually go to that patron, right? So one way that we can do that is to place a request. So just to slow down a second, I was looking at the instance, I opened the holdings accordion, and now I'm going to look at the item. So this is the item record. So here on the item, I'm going to go to that big blue actions button, and I'm going to hit new request. So even though our item doesn't yet have a barcode, we can still make a request for it. And I know there is a user in here with this barcode, happens to be a Rick and Morty reference. We're gonna say that the pickup point is Circ Desk 1. When I hit save and close, it's gonna take me back and look at the request. So we just did a whole whirlwind out of inventory, and now we're currently in the request app and we're looking at a request, right? Okay, so in our imaginary library, a couple of weeks have gone by, or possibly very quickly a couple of days. And we now just got a box, and the box has a book and a bill in it. So what do we need to do next? We need to create an invoice, right? So where are we going to do that? We're going to do that in the Invoices app. We're going to go to our actions and create a new invoice. And again, we're going to put in a bunch of garbage information. But we're going to look up our organization. I think it was Amazon, which has a Z in it. The Z is in a different place on this keyboard. We're going to give it a nonsense number. And I think that's all that's actually required. Okay, so just like our order, we now have the header for our invoice. And now we're going to add an invoice line. So we're going to add a line from our purchase order line. And again, we can search for it here. After the dots get by, we have our invoice line, and it's actually linked to the purchase order line, which is awesome. Now, hopefully, we're going to approve. We got to approve. Let's see if we can get through pay. Oh, yes. All right. That was where it got stuck earlier this morning. So the invoice has now been successfully paid. And if we look at the purchase order line, hopefully, whoops, that's the invoice line. It can even get confusing for me as I'm doing this to remember which app I'm currently in. No worries. We can see that over here, the payment status has been updated to fully paid. But we got something else going on here. We're still awaiting receipt for this book. So in order to receive this item, does anyone know what app we're going to go to? Receiving. Oh my gosh, yes. It is in fact called Receiving. So we can, from here, click on this receive button, and like magic, we're in Receiving. Okay, so Receiving is used to say, like, I have this in hand, I am going to do some more stuff to it, but I've got it here. So we're going to click on Actions, hit Receive, ignore a bunch of really important fields and just type in a barcode, and hit Receive. And it's telling us that this item has an open request. That's the request we placed just a couple of minutes ago. So we'll hit Close. And we are still in Receiving. Come on, buddy. But if we go back to inventory and we look at our item now, we can see that it has a barcode. And instead of on order, its status is now in process, right? Okay, so It's currently on somebody's cart, possibly forgotten for several months, but it's finally ready for our patron. We want to take it out of in process and make it available to them. And what we're going to do here is we're going to scan it in. It's called in some systems, but here it's called check-in. So we are going to check in our item, hit enter. There we go. And it's telling us that this item has an active hold request, and we need to place it on the hold shelf at Circ Desk 1 in order for it to be picked up. I am not going to print a slip because I'm fairly sure that template's not in there, so we'll just hide that. Hit close. Okay, so in our minds, our book is currently on the hold shelf behind our desk. What's the next thing that has to happen? Ideally, we just send an email to our patron, right? So they are gonna come to our desk and pick up their book. And where we do that is called the checkout app. This one can be kind of confusing for people because in some systems it's called charge. So hit enter to look up the patron. And it's saying that this borrower has one item awaiting pickup at this service point. So whoever's working your service point, be it a student worker who you don't really trust, or you yourself, the ultimate in authority, they will know to go pick it up from this service point. Hit close. And now when we scan in our item, all right, we have now checked it out to our patron. So we went all the way from thinking of a book to ordering a book to placing a request on a book to invoicing for that book to receiving the book. We scanned it in and we checked it out, and now it is in the hands of our patrons. So that's just one workflow that uses some of the apps in Folio, but that's sort of how Folio as an ILS works. The last one that I saw that I have like a minute left. So the last one that I really love is the circulation log. So I was a student supervisor for many years. And so one of the things I love knowing is exactly whose fault it is that the book isn't where it's supposed to be. And this is a great way to find that out. So I'm looking for all transactions that use this user barcode. I'm gonna hit apply. And now I can see that someone else has very busily been checking things out to this user, but ours is this one right here. So I can see the request that we created. I can see when we probably filled the request, I'm gonna guess, and I can see when we checked out the book. When I check it in, it would show up in this list as well. So this is just one really useful feature that I particularly like. So we're gonna skip all of my safety slides and go back to this one. So the thing that I wanted to point out is these and more apps are available to you in Folio today. But the ILS that you see today will continue to grow and change to meet new challenges. Maybe there's some feature that's not there that you think is really important and it's not met by any apps that are currently available to you. And the reason we continue to grow and change is because of our community.
So yes, I'm going to start with community. My name is Peter Murray. I'm the open source community advocate at Index Data. And I kind of make it a little bit of my job to help foster the community along. So my goal here today is to describe who the community is, the what the community does, where we are, when we are, and why that's important. And if you follow along through all 5 of those W's and you get to the how, hopefully you'll want to participate in the community if you're not already. First off, though, is who is the community? This is sort of unique. There's a number of ways that the Folio community is unique, that the community has learned from everything that has gone before. And one way is with this combination of subject matter experts, developers, user experience designers, and product owners. Very early on in the project, we took a user experience design first philosophy. And that meant that the subject matter experts needed to get involved in the project in designing it before a line of code was written. So the subject matter experts in the libraries are a very key part of the who. But another way to look at the who is also the organizations that are participating. We have libraries, we have software developers, and we have service providers. And again, one of the unique things about the Folio community is that all three of these are equal partners in the formation of the software. The community and the software and the platform couldn't exist without one of these three involved. And so the recognition that the libraries bring as much as the software developers and bring as much as the service providers is a key aspect.
Hello.
Yes, hello. Chime in if you have any questions. The what that we're building, like I said, we're taking a user experience first design. The gentleman on the slide is Philip Jacobson. He was the lead designer of Folio so many years ago. You will find him at this conference. He's a little grayer on top, but still wearing the same black shirt and black pants. So he looks like that, except a little grayer. And he brought this design philosophy, and I took this paragraph from the guidelines, the process that describes it, that says that, you know, the way the user experiences the software is important from start to finish. The user experience isn't something that we can add at the end of the software when all of the functionality is done. It has to be there at the very start. And so what that means is that we have this pipeline of development. We have discussions, and then we have make pencil sketches on paper, and those pencil sketches get a little more formal into wireframes. For a while, the project relied on prototypes. We don't so much anymore. And then all of that becomes input into what the developers are doing. So at the very beginning, this is one of the very first meetings that Folio ever had, before I think the project was even called Folio, when we were looking at the orders process. And all of these people are subject matter experts, and you can see, you might even be able to recognize more people, Kristen and Anne-Marie and Philip, of course, some other people that may have been maybe gone from the project now, but they are working through Post-it notes to figure out how these apps and their functionality is going to be put together. And then we draw quick sketches. We see, talk through how it makes sense to put things close to each other that we're going to use, and how it will flow from one screen to the other, and we'll scribble it out and we'll write something else down, just to get the basic idea of what this looks like. Then we start making this more formal. We've got a tool that we use to make wireframes. These are starting to look like Folio apps in the buttons along the top, and some of the user interface elements are starting to be a little recognizable. Search boxes and filters here and results and so forth. For a while, before we had code written, we were using a web-based prototype. This looks kind of a lot like what Folio looks now, which is a testament to how close to the original design decisions we've kept, with the filters and the results, and then working with an individual record on the side. But there was no running code behind this. The subject matter experts could rearrange all of these things, clicking and dragging, and figured out what the sequence, what the order of operations were, again, before an actual line of code was ever written. And then finally, we get to the running code. We try to see this early. We try to see this often, so that the feedback loop between the subject matter experts and the designers and the developers is rapid amounts of feedback.
Can
Yeah.
I ask a question or make an advertisement?
Sure.
For another session?
Yes.
Following this at 4 o'clock, I'm on the right day, Wednesday, 4 o'clock in medium 4, room 0.59. There's a session on PO work and to recruit people to be POs or to take part of a role of a PO.
Product owner.
Product owner. And what Peter just described is what a product owner does. They take what a SIG says, what the requirements are. There is assistance in making wireframes, and it's not so hard now because
there's so many to start from. Yeah.
And then a product owner works with the development team, or I call myself a junior product owner because I don't actually have a dedicated development team because my thing is users and users is done. But anyway, then you work with the developers and they come back to you. Did you want it this way? Did you want it that? Do you really want it to say, so pop-ups, does anybody use, the pop-up had close over here, close or cancel. Anyway, we did that on purpose. And then the feedback from users is they want it to be the other way. So that's fine. But those are some of the things that a product owner does. So it isn't just slides that somebody in an ivory tower does.
Yeah.
It is people who work. If you can go to your management and get a few hours a week that you can give to this, it's great. It's a great challenge, and I think it really it teaches you to think. You take these requirements, and then you don't have to say how. That's up to the developer. You say what do you need?
Yeah.
What do you need? And I assure you that I try to be, because Folio being funded, we have limited resources. Sure you want that? Yes. Okay, so then we rewrite the story. So yeah. I would recommend, if anybody is interested at all or liked the look of that, to come to the PO session, because there's many opportunities in Folio and it is very rewarding.
Thank you. Yeah.
Pardon me?
I think Charlotte is in that session.
That is Charlotte's session.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like I'm like a baby librarian. I just graduated from library school. I know. Thank you so much. I definitely earned it. But like, coming from a library science school, like one of the things that interested me so much about this job was hearing about like Charlotte's work with the community and having this totally different vision for Folio than I had experienced as an Alma user. So yeah.
The impact that you can have, as a product owner is quite dramatic.
Anyway, thank you for that.
That was an excellent advertisement.
Teed it up very well. Thank you.
So where we meet, a lot of the special interest groups, the SIGs, meet on Zoom and have discussions on mailing lists and a little bit on Slack. Of course, when we get together, we look like that on Zoom. And if this is starting to entice you at all, you can find out when a special interest group meets by going to their page on the wiki.folio.org. There will be a list of the special interest groups and then a block on the right that says what meetings, when they do meet. And also, of course, we meet at WOLFcon, where we are here today. The meetings do tend to be they tend to be, just because of the way the project got started, tend to be in the early of the day in the Eastern US and in the afternoon in Europe. The project has tried to break ourselves from meeting at the same time or to distribute these meetings into different time zones, but it's been a hard go. There's a lot of inertia behind afternoon Europe, and morning Eastern US. Not to say that it can't be done, but just we're trying to break out of that inertia. So why? We're here because we want to have a sustainable, community-driven product. We want, as a community, to work together to build something that meets the needs of the libraries, something that the service providers and developers can get invested in, and that we expand the value of libraries through open source applications. So the FOLIO project is enabling the widest and deepest engagement. We're open to anyone who wants to join and work on this, whether you're from a library, a software developer, or a service provider. We're looking for long-term sustainability. One of the things that we've talked about is making sure that this software survives the people that are here now. That if Index Data or EBSCO go out of business, or Bywater goes out of business, that there's something here that can continue on without the leadership that's here now. And also to create a space where we can talk about standards and improve how we operate as libraries as our technology accelerates faster and faster. So if that has been the who, what, where, when, and why of any interest at all, and you're not part of the FOLIO community now, here's how you can get involved. First is to go and sign up for the newsletter, www.folio.org. Scroll to the bottom of the page, fill out the form for the newsletter. It comes out relatively infrequently, once a month, twice a month. You'll get news about WOLFcon and other things like that. That's the barest minimum. If you just want to know what's happening with FOLIO at a very high level, sign up for the newsletter. Secondly, go look at the FOLIO YouTube channel. There's a wealth of content that is there. Kind of prior pandemic, we've slacked off a little bit creating YouTube videos as a community since the pandemic started, but there's still a lot of good information there, demos of apps and things like that. Next, join those special interest groups. Go to wiki.folio.org. Look at the list of interest groups on the right side in the bulleted list. Join one, just lurk for a while, subscribe to the mailing list, join quietly into the meetings, see what they're all about, and then just join your whole self. There's also 3 councils that help the projects, that steer the project along, 3 governance communities, the Community Council, the Product Council, and the Technical Council. Lastly, if your organization is one that is starting to use FOLIO, that it's become an integral part of your library operation, consider joining FOLIO and the Open Library Foundation. Those membership dollars go to support events like this. They go to support the tools that we use to develop the software. As we get a bigger and bigger group, we hope to fund through FOLIO a pool of developers that will be responsive to the community and build what the community needs. And lastly, get involved. You there at the very end of the nested dolls. Get involved in the project. You'll find it rewarding. I hope, hopefully as rewarding as I've found it. So from community, we're going to look now at what FOLIO means as a platform.
Thanks, Peter. So my sense is most of you are librarians rather than developers. Is that right? Hands up, developers. Okay. Okay, 1. So this is more of a developer's perspective, but I hope that won't It won't turn anyone off because it's very much to do with the philosophy of how FOLIO was built technically. FOLIO?
FOLIO, love it.
All right, I'm going with FOLIO from now on. Yeah, rather than getting too nitty gritty. And really the key point that I want to make is that although there is a thing that's the FOLIO library management system, underneath that is another thing that maybe confusingly is also called FOLIO, and that's the FOLIO software platform. And that provides an environment for modules to run in. And the modules are the pieces of software that provide the apps that Tara was showing you. In England, you would be called Tara. I'm trying to acclimatize. So a module is not quite the same thing as an app. An app in general is made up of multiple modules, and I won't get into too much detail about that. But the key point here is that they run in an environment provided by the FOLIO platform, and that environment has services it makes available to the modules to let it do library-like things. So, for example, a framework for handling internationalization so that you can make the same applications work correctly in both US English and German, and database facilities and a bunch of other more technical things. So that's what the FOLIO platform gives you. So what exactly is a module then? Well, it's a program that has specific properties that are defined and written down in the FOLIO developer documentation. But beyond that, it really can be anything. So for example, it doesn't matter what programming language is used. If you have technologists at your library who want to build a module and it happens that they like writing visual object-oriented COBOL, then they're quite at liberty to do that, provided that the program they write fulfills these specific properties that make it a FOLIO module. And again, I don't want to go into too much detail about that, but it's things like accepting requests as web service requests and responding in a format that's recognizable to FOLIO. So, and they're not onerous requirements. An experienced developer can build something that fulfills that contract relatively straightforwardly. What's important about modules is that they're modular. So no module can know or needs to know what's happening inside another module. It only knows what contract that module undertakes. So for example, the users module provides a bunch of ways where other modules can say to it, find me a user whose first name is Fred, or tell me which users have had their accounts disabled in the last month. And then other modules that need to know this information, they don't poke around in a database. They don't know what database the user's module is using, but they can ask that module the question directly. And you probably guessed where I was going with this, that FOLIO library management system is nothing but a whole bunch of FOLIO modules all running on the FOLIO platform. So in this case, agreements, bulk edit, check-in, and all the ones that Tara showed you earlier. They're all modules, and they were all developed. Well, many of them were developed independently. So one group built the users app, another group entirely built all the electronic resource management stuff. But they work together because they're designed to these contracts. So here's another way to think about the benefits of modularity. There are drawbacks too, but I'm here to talk mostly about the benefits. Since that's a technical decision we made, I'm obviously going to tell you it was the right one. So you can think of a running FOLIO system as just being your web browser connecting to a black box, well, a yellow box in this case, called FOLIO. But inside there, you have this bunch of modules running alongside each other in the shared environment, interacting only in these well-defined ways. And one of the reasons that's important is because you can make changes, or your FOLIO administrator can, by replacing, not just adding new modules or getting rid of ones you don't need, but also replacing modules with equivalent ones. Let's say, for example, that instead of wanting to maintain all your users in FOLIO, your library already has a perfectly good way of maintaining the register of who the users are. And you don't want to use FOLIO's users, but you want FOLIO to work with your existing users. then you can take out the user's module that comes with Folio. You can have your developers write an alternative version of the user's module that maybe consults an LDAP directory or something like that, but which is plug compatible because there's this defined interface that the user's module has to fulfill. And then if you do that and you run it in there, everything will just work. So the existing user interface that we use for managing users will work the same for you as it does for any other Folio user, even though under the hood, you're running a very different implementation of the user register. Does that make sense? So this I'm going to skim through because it does get a little more technical. Exactly what the platform consists of. There's a framework written in Node.js, which is called Stripes, and all of the user interface parts run inside that framework. And that provides some of the visual scaffolding, but also a lot of facilities to do with things like how we present choices of things or lists of things or checkboxes for searching. There's a lot of uniformity to the user interface, even though the modules are written by different people, because they have this shared toolkit. Then there's a thing called Okapi, which is it's what's known as an API gateway. So the idea is, although there are lots of different modules running on the back end, the user interface doesn't need to know about them. It can send all the requests to one place, and that place is the API gateway. And when we were building this, we thought, let's not be too arrogant. Let's not say it's going to be an awesome API. Let's just say it's going to be an okay API. And that's where the name comes from. And then the other thing that's important in the platform is a set of shared conventions for how modules do things. So one I've already touched on is this idea that they should run as web services. So you always make a request of a module via Okapi by sending an HTTP request. And what you'll get back will always be JSON. That's the format that's used here with all the curly brackets and the quote marks. And this seems like a trivial thing, but it just means a lot of shared tooling is possible. It's much easier for developers to analyze messages and understand what's going on because of these shared ways of doing things. And the other critical part that comes with the framework is the infrastructure for authentication and permissions. So every action that you might do in Folio, you're only able to do if the user that you're logged in as has the appropriate permissions. And there are all sorts of structures to do with how permissions can contain sub-permissions, and you can design your permission structure to represent roles in the library. There's a lot of flexibility with that, but all the core of that is provided and enforced by the gateway. So you don't need to worry about, your developers don't need to worry about coding things in a way where they check, oh, does the user have the permission to do this? Because if they don't, Okapi will make sure the request doesn't even come through. So the security is enforced at that layer. And then, yes, sorry, do go on. Were you asking a question? Okay, I guess we're just getting a lot of people who don't think to mute when they come into these things. So the Folio platform, consisting of Stripes and Okapi and the conventions and the rest of it, why did we do it that way rather than just building an ILS? Well, partly it's to support the modular development, of course, but it also means you can use the same platform to build other things. So here's one that you'll already have heard mentioned. It's another thing being built by the Open Library Foundation. It's an ILL system called Reshare. And you can see that in cosmetic terms, it looks very much like Folio. It's got this same bar of different applications across the top, but the actual applications are very different apart from users. So here we have a list of incoming, outgoing, rather ILL requests. And this is all built on the same platform using a lot of the same facilities by some of the same developers, but not all of them. Again, because the way to build modules is defined. It doesn't need kind of insider knowledge to do that. And then part of what excites me is what we haven't yet built and could go on to. So all sorts of things libraries might use. One that exercises me as a researcher and an open access advocate is a good institutional repository running on the Folio platform. So we'll see if somebody wants to fund that at some point. But drop me a line if you do. And what's more exciting is things that we haven't yet thought of. So this is where, again, subject matter experts are incredibly important in Folio. It's where all this ties back to the community. It isn't enough for developers to say, we want to build an institutional repository. The real issue is, what do libraries need? And whatever that might be, Folio, from my perspective, is a really good platform for building that on. If you want to read more about the details of the modularity, this fine article recently published in the International Journal of Librarianship will fill you in. And again, this may be of more interest to your developers if you're lucky enough to have those in your library. And also, I will be talking in much more detail about this element of modularity tomorrow at 11:30. So I don't know how much the audience for that talk overlaps with this one, but you may know people who would find it useful to know more of this, and we'll get into some of the downsides of them as well as the upsides. But what I want to finish with really is just how very much these different aspects tie in together. So it's not by accident that Folio is open in these different ways. The significance of the modular design only really arises because we have the community. If it was just a modular design and people from EBSCO built all of the modules, you wouldn't necessarily have gained all that much. But because we've got a much broader community, we have modules written by a whole bunch of different software vendors and by different universities. And I hope, and again, this is something I'll talk about more tomorrow, I hope we can open up the culture surrounding the creation of modules in a way where we even have interested individuals just putting something together and saying, look, here's something I made. Would this be useful for your library? And then that raises a whole bunch of other issues about things like how do you know who to trust, all of which I will address tomorrow. But I want you to just feel that basically the idealism of this, and we at Index Data are essentially an idealistic company. It's really strange to me that to accuse somebody of being an idealist has become a sort of an insult over the last 5 or 10 years. But we don't accept that insult, we accept it as a compliment, because we really are out to build something that can't be captured, including by us. You know, we don't want to be the company that controls Folio because we don't want there to be a company that controls Folio. We just want a level playing field that we can compete on, and we back ourselves. So those are my 3 senses of what Folio is, and I think we've got